The video you're about to watch is actually part of a bigger course, which is called ClickUp Fundamentals Mastery. And if you want to get access, it's absolutely free. You can find the link in the description below. And by the way, if you need help with your ClickUp setup, you can also find the link to schedule a 30-minute discovery session in the comment section below this video. With that said, let's get to the class. Let's move on with step number 4 in our process first ClickUp implementation framework. We've covered the first 3 steps, which is visualizing the current process, identifying the deliverables, designing the ClickUp structure, and the step number 4 is going to be documenting the new process. Now, we've reviewed the hiring process as an example that I showed you previously. Again, you saw the diagram that I've built here, deliverables that we identified, and also this ClickUp structures that we came up with. By the way, if you want to reuse this Miro board, just as a reminder, you should have a link in somewhere in the resources to this Miro board template so that you can reuse it inside your Miro account and basically follow the steps from here. We're going to go and dive into the step number 4, which is document new process. Extremely important. Many times in my projects, I hadn't done it, so I want you not to miss this step because it's extremely important for the team to adopt the structure. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of why we or how we do this, let me explain to you why. I've done some of the projects and I've had some success with companies, right? I would build something with ClickUp, they would start using the system. But then what I figured is that every time, many times I should say, in my career, I would build something in ClickUp and just give it to the team and say, hey guys, you are good to go. So I would get paid, it was success for me. I would make money. I would think that, we're doing great job with ClickUp. But what happens is in the course of a couple of months, the ClickUp would actually, or the team I was working with would not actually keep using ClickUp. So they would not, whenever I give them the structure, everything would make sense. They would say, yeah, Ilya, that makes sense. We know how to use it. In a couple of weeks, they would get lost. They would forget about the process that we discussed previously. And I didn't have any documentation at the time, so the teams would just stop using it. And then they would come back and say, hey, Ilya, we're not using ClickUp. And I was like, why? We've done a great job together and you're not using it. They're saying, yeah, because we don't understand how. Over and over again, I've done this mistake. I don't want you to do this. So the step number 4 is not only we need to build ClickUp and implement this in the company, we also need to document how will the work change now with ClickUp. And this is what I have here. The step number 4, how will it work with ClickUp now? Answer this question, and by answering this question, we also need to document it, which we're using the flow diagrams or the swim lane diagrams or business diagrams over here, which basically tell you how the work is going to change right now. So you can see previously, for example, we were preparing a job opening draft, right? And after that, if you remember at the top, we reviewed the diagram and it said, send or share the job opening draft with the HR director. Here what it says upload a job opening draft PDF to ClickUp job opening task, right? So instead of sending an email, now you're uploading this to the ClickUp task and just assigning it to your HR director. So it changes slightly the way you do work. But what I found is when you're explaining to people how their work is going to change, it let them get prepared much better and adopt the system much better. I can tell you that the hardest part of all with ClickUp implementations is not building things. It's actually making teams use ClickUp and feeling that it is part of their day-to-day work. So this is the hardest part I figured really exists, and many teams are just skipping it. And I've done this in the past as well. I would just build something, give it to them and say, my work is done, but it's not, because we need to document it and we need also to make sure that people are comfortable using it. Many times when you're building ClickUp, some of your team members have never heard of ClickUp before. They have not used it before, even though I mentioned they can watch the course of the basics and understand what ClickUp is and how to use the basic functionalities, but sometimes they have no idea. So when you're building something more advanced and you're giving to your team, right, and you're saying, guys, you're good to go, they might be just confused. And this is where this documentation comes into play. Now, you don't need to create anything fancy. I know there is a lot about the SOPs and you can put the documentation together, all that. I figured that the easiest way and the simplest way of doing this is just creating a diagram. It communicates very easily of what are all the steps, what are all the expectations from different parts or different business roles, right? So that people understand how their day-to-day work is going to change. And what business diagrams are also good for is that anyone can come here and understand it. It's just basically very simple. It's step by step. Just prepare a job post, upload this, do that. It goes to a different person. All right, it's very simple, very straightforward. You don't need to be a genius to understand the diagram. Sometimes when you're putting together more complex documentation with like links and different screenshots and all that, it becomes too messy. People never use it and you're just wasting time. So I figured creating diagrams just gives that nice communication tool for everyone so they can come back here, see the diagram. If the process gets updated in the future, you update the diagram and it serves you as the documentation. So that's basically the idea behind the very last piece. And I found that many times, again, I would miss this part. So I don't want you to miss this step. So I want you to document the new process and answer the question, how will it work with ClickUp now? Again, you're going to get access somewhere in the resources to this Miro board so you can reuse this diagram, this template, and you can create your process and your documentation. And again, whenever someone needs to get back to understand how the process works or how ClickUp is set up, you basically give them the link and say, hey guys, go check out this diagram. That's as simple as that. What I also like about Miro, you can add different comments here. So you can say add comment and you can add links and you can say, this is the view you're going to be using, this is the task you're going to be using, or this is the template you can find in ClickUp. So Miro diagram can contain a lot of information inside this process diagram, which becomes really, really cool when it comes to like sharing this with your team, especially with the new team members who are just getting started and need to know how to do their job and what's the expectation, right? So this is the step number 4. Again, it sounds very simple, it sounds very straightforward, but I found that many teams failed, and I failed a lot of times with this step in the past. What I also found is when you're doing this exercise together with the team, you're not only documenting the process, you're also teaching them the framework. You're giving them better understanding of how to think about all the improvements in the future for your company. And I've seen incredible results with other companies. They would just, the teams and the people would just transform. They would become, instead of being like, just, oh, I'm just doing my job here, they would become excited. They would say, Ilya, like I remember we did it together with you this way, and I figured, why don't I try it for a different process? So I tried, and this is what I have. And there are great advantages for this, again, because the change is driven now from within your organization and not just from the outside people. With that said, this is the 4-step framework, which is called the Process First ClickUp framework. We've covered the second part of the course, which is the ClickUp setup framework that I have again learned over the 6 years. And I figured that following the steps will help you get the most out of ClickUp and get the most success with ClickUp. With that said, we're going to be moving on to the bonus section of this course, which is the 3 ClickUp advanced features that I'm going to be covering in the next class.